Hey guys, thanks for tuning into my channel. We did a few MRE reviews before. I'd wanted to do my channel kind of about cooking, food reviews, fishing, and then the other thing that I wanted to do was motorcycles. So this is my bike. I want to tell you a little bit about it. It's a Triumph Scrambler 900. So this is the first iteration of the Triumph Scrambler since they've made the Street Scrambler, which is generally would be considered an upgrade from this bike. So I actually got a really good deal on this bike because it was a 2017 that I bought in 2018, and it was the last of them. So I got a really good financing deal and money off and everything like that. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. So this is basically the same thing as a Triumph Bonneville, but they take, and Tommy, if you want to come over to this side, they make a couple of mods for you that it comes from the factory with. The exhaust is the big thing. You've got the exhaust up at knee level instead of where it would normally come underneath and along the bottom of the frame and out. Now the obvious potential disadvantage there is your leg is right next to the exhaust, but it's got these plastic baffles on it, and they do a pretty good job of dissipating the heat. I mean, if you manage to get your leg into this area a little bit in between the baffles, you can get it a little overheated, but generally speaking, it's not too bad. I liked it mainly because of the look. It's obviously there because back in the day, people would move their exhausts up. I am being reminded that it's a British motorcycle, okay? And it's really, I think it's the only big British brand that's currently being imported in the US. We're still getting Royal Enfields, but they are now an Indian bike rather than a British bike. So anyway, as far as the exhaust, that's one thing. And then you look up here, there's a skid plate that they put on here. So the idea was you could take this bike off-road. Not crazy off-road like you might a dirt bike, but you can take it onto fire trails and things like that. It's got a nice big front wheel. It's got the spoke. This is a retro styled bike. It's designed to look like the original Triumphs back in the 60s and 70s. It is air cooled. The Street Scrambler that they're coming out with now is liquid cooled. But come on over here, Tommy. You can see it does have an oil cooler at the front, but it does not have, I'm sorry, right here is the oil cooler, but it does not have a radiator. So, if you're in traffic in the heat, fighting chance, you're going to get real hot, and you may even have to shut the motor down for a little while. But it doesn't become much of a problem in normal riding, and it's nice when it's cooler out because the engine does put out a lot of heat that can keep you a little bit warmer. You can see it's made to look as though it has carburetors, but it is not carbureted. It's fuel injected. This is just a fast idle. It's got two detents for fast idling, and then it is actually fuel injected though. It's an 865cc parallel twin. They do, I think it's a 270 degree firing order, which basically gives it a kind of a meatier growl than the typical. So that's another thing that makes it a little bit different from the traditional Bonneville. You look in the back, and this is, I think, a Triumph thing. It's actually got the chain final drive, but it's on the right side instead of the left side. It's not a big deal. It's taking a little getting used to. I've only ever had Hondas and Kawasaki's before. I used to be big into sport, and I still love sport, but I'm getting older, and it's kind of hard to sit hunched over all the time the way you have to with a sport bike. Relatively small gas tank. You find yourself filling it up fairly often, and it does not have a fuel gauge. It does have a fuel warning light, which is here. It's also got the check engine light. It's got your typical stuff, the high beams. One thing I'll say about this bike is it's funny because when I haven't ridden it at night a lot. When you turn the high beams on, the high beam light is so bright that you almost can't use them because it's flashing in your face so much that the extra light coming out of the headlight bulb is canceled out by the lack of night vision that causes. So that's something that, I don't know if you can really do anything about that. I may look into it as far as whether or not you can dull that. But that's one thing about the bike that I don't really care for. It has ride-by-wire throttle. So Tommy, if you want to show him the throttle, it doesn't look any different from typical, really, but it's electronic. Now I have found, and I've put about 1,100 miles on this bike, that sometimes if you don't hit it really hard, if you do a little more subtle twist, that it will stall sometimes, even if you haven't let the clutch out. So that's another thing. I'm going to take it back and get a look in the forums and find out if it's something that other people are having problems with. If anybody knows anything about that, definitely leave a comment. I imagine that it's something that with an adjustment can be fixed, but I have had it happen a couple of times now, and it's, like I said, it's when the clutch is all the way in, it'll still do it. So I don't know, that it may just be something that I'm doing a little bit wrong, but I do find that I'm not getting great gas mileage because when I'm going to stop, I'm almost always giving it some gas to make sure that it doesn't that it does not stall like that. Everything else is pretty standard. All bikes that come into the US and pretty much the vast majority of motorcycles have your high and low beams, your turn signals, your horn. It's got a little pass light here, which I've never used on any motorcycle, so it is what it is. And your start switch is over here. The key is, the ignition rather, is right up here. And a lot of cruisers put the ignition in an odd spot, either here. I had a Honda where it was down near the carburetors one time. So it makes it so that unless you're in neutral, you more or less have to shut the bike off using the safety switch and then remember to turn the key. So it's not a big deal, but that's another thing that's taking some getting used to. One of these days, I will leave the key on and forget and probably kill the battery. But luckily, they gave me a battery tender with the new bike purchase, so if I ever had to, I can plug it in. I also use this to put an auxiliary cord. As you can see, the only mod, so to speak, that I've done on it is I've put this cell phone mount on it, and this works really well. This is Widras, W-I-D-R-A-S. You can get that on Amazon. It wasn't too expensive. I think it was less than $20, and I've had it out on the highway, going highway speeds with my cell phone in there, iPhone 7, and it hasn't moved a bit. And so I run the cord up from down where that battery tender is, and I can charge it, and you can go all day like that, and it's great. So it's a very nice riding bike, very enjoyable to ride. I love the position. Tommy, if you want to step back a bit and I'll just sit on it. And I'm going to say I would never recommend riding a bike in the outfit that I'm wearing now with the shorts and flip-flops, but we're just doing a kind of a static review right now. So sit on it, you sit nice and upright. And the thing about this big, you can come closer now, Tommy, if you want to. The thing about having this big long seat is obviously you can put a passenger on here. It comes with passenger pegs and they'd be pretty comfortable, but you can, if you want to, excuse me, you can sit back like this if you want. You can move your butt up closer to the tank if you want to. It gives you lots of space to move around. And there's, don't get too close to me, buddy. Nobody wants to see me that close. With the peg, you got nice big foot pegs, and while you're riding around, it's easy to stand up and move about, and that's set up that way because this is, like I said, this bike is designed for going on light off-road gravel type or fire, what they call fire roads a lot of times. So anyway, let me fire it up for you real quick, and then we'll probably go ahead and end the review, at least for now. To give you a sense of the sound. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to do just one more kind of general walk around the bike to show it. Brakes are pretty good. Single disc at the front. Never going to be the best setup, but it's not a hugely heavy bike. I don't remember exactly how much it weighs, but I think it's about 550 pounds or something like that. Maybe a little less than that. I would recommend looking it up. Like I said, they don't make this particular Scrambler anymore. If you wanted to buy a new one, you have to get the Street Scrambler, which by most accounts would be a better motorcycle. But one thing this bike has that I do like better than the Street is this double gauge setup up here. I like that there's the two buckets, if you will. I don't like the single as much, but that's just an aesthetic thing. And you can do almost anything with these bikes. You know, you can adjust the handlebars, new seats. I'm planning to probably get a seat with a rack at the back. It does have, I'll show you real quick, it's got this side cover here. There's not really much you can put back there, but there's a tool for getting the seat off. There's also an access cover on the other side that's where I store the paperwork for it. It's just enough space to put a couple little things, so I put the paperwork in there. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions, comments? Let me know if you have any thoughts on that ride-by-wire system that I've been having a little bit of bad luck with. But again, I haven't looked into it that much, so I don't want to say that that's necessarily a Triumph problem. It might just be a me problem. This is my first bike of this sort. But that'll do it. I'll probably do more videos about the bike, though, as I've had it for longer. Thanks.